Hello, everyone, and thank you, Victoria, for the introduction and also for inviting FAO to deliver this presentation on water and food. For those who are not familiar with FAO, FAO is an specialized agency of the United Nations that has been existing for 81 years. We celebrated the 80th anniversary last year. And our main core business is to fight hunger and malnutrition, but that also entails the sustainable use of natural resources, and water is one of the most important natural resources that agriculture use. So I'm going to share my presentation. Okay, so my key message now that I think it's important for educators who work on raising awareness, no, on water issues and food issues, is that when in every meal we have, in a cup of coffee, a cup of tea, bread, everything, there is a lot of water which is hidden, and many times we don't know that. And I think this is the most important. This is one of the most important um, challenges that we have now, right? That we have less and less water, but we also need to feed a growing population. And this is why for FAO, this is a very important topic. So this is an image that was taken by the Artemis mission that when they recently went to the moon. And if you can see, what we call, no, this is the blue planet. So that gives us the impression that there is a lot of water in Earth, and that water is an abundant natural resources. But then when we count the water that we can use, we realize that almost 97% of the water in Earth is salty. So that means we cannot use it for growing food, we cannot use it for drinking or for domestic purposes. And also, out of this 3%, which is fresh water, is locked out in ice and also in groundwater. So that means that it's not easily accessible. We cannot use it also for our purposes. And we just have 1.2% of the water, which is in lakes and rivers, and that we can use it for our activities. So if you look at the map, the green map, now is not blue anymore because we want to show in proportion the tiny share of water which is usable for our activities. So when you see that, when you account for the fresh water, and out of the fresh water, the water which we can use, we change our mind, right? We see that water is not abundant anymore. We need to share this tiny drop among billions of people, among different economic activities. Is agriculture, but it's also industry, it's also drinking water, and it's also water for the environment. And it's not anymore about how much water we have, but also how we can manage water and how we can share water. And this is a big challenge. So this is why water has been is one of the sustainable development goals that the UN and the countries follow as the framework for development. The governments and the countries, they decided that water should be a very important and a specific objective in this framework of sustainable development goals. And water is not important just for water, but it's also important for other development goals. There is no food security if there is no water. There is no education if there is no access to water. There is no equality if access to water is ensured for everyone. So water is linked also to other sustainable developments. So with this, this is a map that we have produced at FAO, which shows what is the level of water stress in the world in countries. So when you see a red or a yellow or a brown, that means that countries have very critical and a lot of challenges with water stress. When we talk about water stress, I'm not talking about deserts or arid areas because water stress is related to the availability of water, but also to the demand of water. So if we live in a place which has a lot of abundant resources, but there is also a huge demand, we may have also water scarcity and water stress. So if you look at the map, we see that there are a lot of red, a lot of yellow, and a lot of brown. And this brown and yellow is increasing. Every year we find in FAO that we collect information that more countries are facing these problems of water scarcity. And we see also that the water resources are unevenly distributed in the world. And also within a country, we find different areas with different situations in terms of water scarcity. So we have measured how the renewable water resources per capita is changing. And we see that if we compare the water in 2015 until 2022 per capita, and this is less than 10 years, we see that there has been a decrease already of 7% of the renewable water resources per capita. And which sectors and who is using the water? So this can be also a surprise for many when we account for the uses of water by the different sectors. We find that agriculture is by far the main user of water resources. According to the latest data that FAO has collected, 72% of the total water withdrawals in the world are are done by the agricultural sectors. And in many countries, this is even higher. We have countries, for instance, in North Africa, where 80% or 90% of the fresh water resources are done by the agricultural sector. So what this tells us is like when we talk about food, when we talk about agriculture, we talk also a lot about water. Agriculture and the food sector are very vulnerable to the changes in water, to the water scarcity, but they are also the main cause of water scarcity in many countries. So we need to look at food and agriculture as an important sector when we talk about water policies and water strategies to manage water wisely. So what are the main drivers of this water stress? Because as I said, water stress is not only because there is a lack of availability of water, it's because there is a growing demand. So we are more and more people in the world. There is a population growth, and that means that we need more water for our drinking purposes, for our domestic purposes, but we also need more food. And we have seen that agriculture is the main user by far of freshwater resources. So according also to the studies that FAO has done, we find that we will need to produce 50% more food in 2050. So that means that we will need at least 30% more of freshwater resources. And if you remember the map, there are already a lot of countries and a lot of areas in which people are facing high levels and critical levels of water scarcity. Another important driver is urbanization. We live the more and more in cities, and cities need food in the supermarkets, and this food need to travel um, long distance, and that also means that we need more water to feed people in the urban areas, and also their basic needs in terms of water for drinking water and sanitation. Then there is also economic development. Industry is developing. Um, we also change our diet, and that is something that I will talk later. So that means that the demand per person of water is also increasing. And finally, we have climate change that we are all seeing. I mean, in the news, I think we all accept that the climate is changing. We have more droughts, more extreme events, floods that are also creating water scarcity because the water that comes with floods, we cannot use it. So it doesn't rain when it's needed for growing crops. So this is also important changes that we need to take into account when we account for water. So this is a map, this is a graph that shows how the population is changing from rural to urban. So in 1950, there were more people living in rural areas than in urban areas. In 2009, there was a change. And then since then, we have seen how population in urban areas is increasing. And that means that more people who live in the cities need to be fed. And this has also an impact on our diets. So people living in cities or people with more resources eat more meat, they eat more processed food, and that also requires more water. So this is something that we do often with the students is, well, we usually organize Kahoot. So the students can guess how much water is used for different diets. So it's not the same to eat 1 kilo of wheat because that requires 1,500 liters of water than 1 kilo of meat that requires even 15,000 liters of water per kilo. So there is there in the slide you can see there is a link to a calculator of the water footprint that has been developed by UNESCO, and this can be used in the classroom for students to calculate, what is their water footprint in their lives, but also depending on what they eat or drink. And as I said, FAO, our core business is to fight hunger, to work for to try that not anyone suffers from hunger. And we also collect information on what is the situation in terms of food security. And this is the latest map that we have related to hunger. So when you see brown or orange, that means that big percentage of the population are facing hunger. And hunger is very much related to the availability of water. Hunger has like three main drivers. One is conflicts. When there are wars, of course, the farmers cannot grow food, and that has an impact on food security. Economic downturns also is a big driver, but also the availability of water is an important driver of hunger. So if we work to improve the access of water in the rural areas for agriculture, we will also address this problem of food insecurity and hunger. And when we talk about water scarcity, is not only the quantity of water, is also the quality of water. Because if the water is is polluted, we cannot use it. So this is a map that shows the number of deaths uh, due to water pollution, because the pollution of water has an impact in, of course, in our livelihoods, but also in our health. In many countries, they are irrigating with dirty water, and that has an impact in in diseases, right? In diarrhea, and many kids and many people die because of this dirty water. So when we think about water, we should think not only on the quantity, but also on the quality of the water. So how we work, how FAO works to address these challenges that are very important. So first of all, is not just a single, let's say, institution or a single government that needs to take action. So it's a question of cooperating among others. So it needs to be governments together with research institutions, with the private sector, with the civil society, international organization, farmers. And here also education and educators have a very important role to raise awareness on the importance of conserving, on managing sustainable the water resources for our future. So in principle, it's about innovation, technologies, infrastructure, of course. It's about knowing how much water we have, because if we don't know how much water we have, we cannot manage. And then also to have an enabling policy environment which allows also vulnerable population to have access to water and raise awareness on how to use water more wisely in agriculture. So I will I will now explain some of the stories or the projects that in which FAO has been working, so you can see how some actions have an impact also on the lives of the people, and how access to water can dramatically change the future of the community. So the photos that you see is from a project in southern Angola. So the communities living there, they had no access in the past to water. So the women had, and the women and the girls, they had to walk 3 kilometers to get water. But then FAO with the government of Angola, there was a project to build this small dam that you can see in the photo, and that has dramatically changed the lives of the population living there, and especially of the women. So now they have water when for the during the dry period, and they have also water for their domestic and drinking purposes. So just small infrastructure can really change the lives of people in the rural areas. This is another example of how simple technologies can have big impacts. This is that's finished, but this was a program that was implemented in the Sahel, which is a very arid area in which communities really suffer from water scarcity. Yeah, so also working on the irrigation technologies is important. So this is an example in Morocco where um, farmers were given irrigation systems that were more efficient in terms of using water, which this is what we call drip irrigation. So there are different technologies to irrigate crops, and drip irrigation and sprinkler irrigations are the ones that are more efficient because there are more, you produce more crop per drop, and you have less water. So this is also an initiative that can help farmers and the country to produce food with less water. And now in all the water conferences and in the global dialogues, the more and more countries are advocating for the wastewater reuse, and even desalination for irrigation. Even in Spain and also North African countries now, they are using desalinated water for crops. Imagine the level of water scarcity. So if you have to invest on desalination for irrigation, but the more and more countries are now using these non-conventional waters. And as I said, also counting water is very important. So FAO has the AQUASTAT, which is the FAO's information system on water and agriculture, where is an open database where educators can also find a lot of information on how much water is being used in the different sectors, and what is the productivity also of the water that's being used in agriculture. And also, it's not all about technologies or infrastructure, about capacity. It's a lot about social and cooperation. So 60% of the freshwater resources are in river basins that are shared by countries. And this can be a problem, but that can be also a solution. So we need to improve the cooperation among countries on how to share the resources. And this is something also that educators can work with the students on, the importance of cooperating and to share them, to conserve the natural resources. And just to finalize, investing in the environment is also investing in conserve water. So forests, wetlands, and the soil are big reservoirs of water. So if we conserve the forest, if we conserve the wetlands and the soil, we will have more storage for water that then we can use for producing water, but also for producing food, but also for other purposes. So this is the solutions that can be taken, by countries, international organizations, research institutions, but we can also do a lot of things also to conserve water. The first thing is to eat local and seasonal food and fresh food, because this fresh food needs much less water than the processed food that needs also the packaging, and that also consumes a lot of water. Food waste, reduce food waste is also very important. I think when the students understand the amount of water which is included in a tomato or in a piece of meat, they will be more careful on throwing this food, right? Because this is a very limited resources that we need to conserve. So when we throw food, we are throwing a lot of water. And then, of course, we need to not pollute water. We explain is not only about quantity, but also quality. So throwing medicines or oil in the sink will pollute water, will cost a lot of money to recycle this water. So let's try not to do that. And then I would like to finish with some resources that you can use in the classrooms. So in YouTube, you can find two videos that has been prepared by FAO. One is on 8 actions that we can all take to save water. And also another nice video which tells what does water mean to different people, no farmer, but also kids. And this is also, I think, interesting to see how water is important in our daily life. Then there is also an activity book that was also prepared by FAO, which is called Water is Life, Water is Food. This is meant for kids, and it also includes very nice stories on how your actions can have an impact on water resources. And then there is also this nice book, which is also a film in Netflix, which is called The Boy Who Harnessed the Wind, which presents very nicely the vulnerability of rural populations to the rain. So when you depend on rain you are very vulnerable. You can suffer hunger, but when you have infrastructure to irrigate your crops, your life can change. No, and this book and this Netflix film shows this story, and I think it's very interesting for kids. And just to say to the end, Victoria mentions the Earth Way, but we also celebrate the World Water Day, which is the 22nd of March. And it's also very nice if the schools with the students can celebrate this World Water Day. The UN agencies through UN Water, we always prepare a lot of material for schools and for educators for this World Water Day. For instance, this year was focusing on water and gender equality, but each year has a different theme. And in the webpage of UN Water, you can find a lot of material also and all the activities that all the institutions are doing for the different campaigns. And I think I can stop here. Of course, I'm available if you have questions or if you want to contact me in the future for any material or any information you may need. Thank you very much.